Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Untriggered Woman Podcast. My name is Mia Vivone, and what we discuss here in this podcast are real life accounts of survivors of all types of trauma and their successes. There's nothing I like better than to interview a woman who has gone through her deep healing process and has come out the other side victorious. And today I'm meeting with, just quite simply, my friend Meg. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Mia. How are you?
I'm doing great. I so enjoyed our pre-interview, sound and video check. And, it's hard to take off the laughter. I mean, I'm literally still crying and talk about such a, serious subject. We're here today to actually discuss court-sanctioned abuse. And I know right there, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to cringe, and all I want to say about that is too bad. Because we need to talk about it. We really need to talk about what it's like to be married to a narcissistic personality, informal diagnosis, of course. And then what happens when we get a divorce decree and a custody settlement for our children, and we're anticipating that when we go through this process and we're divorced, that the terror is over. And Meg,
Yep.
it's not true. It's just
No.
not true. Now, you and I have been friends for 5 years, just about 5 years.
Yeah.
And because we're pretty close, you've been exposed to my coaching, with or without your permission, I'm sure.
Thankfully. Thankfully. Yes.
Right. But because of our connection together, I have been to court proceedings with you,
Yes.
and I have been a compassionate ear and supportive counsel. And that's not to credit me, but just to give people who are listening or watching an idea of the nature of our relationship. And I've got to see your little boy, who we don't need to mention his name today, but your little boy just grow up, and it's amazing. And
So fast.
um, so fast, so
Yeah.
fast. I would like to start by you telling me a little bit of what it looked like in the home with this person that is the father of your child, before we started going to court for your divorce and your child support agreement.
Right. So just a little background. In a nutshell, met this person um through family members, and it was, hey, this person, and seemingly was, great and loving and supportive and all of the things that you would hope for as you go into a long-term relationship and then marriage. Um, and then the first year was pretty rough. The unmasking happened, and there were things that kind of even happened pre-marriage. And, I didn't have those tools. I didn't understand what that was and what, an undiagnosed narcissistic relationship was. Um, Coming from, my own personal background, so was a lot of people in my own life. And once I then started to see those patterns unfold, um, it got pretty jarring. Um, and there was also some substance abuse problems that occurred. And I, was of the mindset at that time that, marriage has problems and you just got to work them out, and you got to try and do your best. And if you want it to work, you got to put in the work. Well, there's a certain point where it becomes, this is my life or this is my death. And I had to face that with a very young child. And it was scary. It's very scary. Um, and there were some times that were infuriating and just I couldn't believe that this was the person who was supposed to love me and supposed to love our children. And, I really had to make some really hard decisions, not only for myself, but for my children and for my child. Um, Thankfully, I have found a great support in Mia and my family and friends and all of those things. But essentially, um, life exploded and it was pretty rough. And I was trying to hold it together because I had little ears and little eyes watching me. And um, it wasn't pretty, it wasn't fun, but it was necessary. That work was a rebirth. It was rebirth. And thankfully I had a really great support group to help me through that. Um, I did a lot of work. And court was another battlefield. So it was not only was I battling my own internal stuff as to, why questions and how come this is happening to me and all of those kinds of things and how could this person and all of those thoughts that go through your head. It was then also a lot of the functions of court were non-supportive. And so I really had to seek out those voices and those supportive people in the community in online to find support, because when you're in the midst of those very vulnerable times, that is where then people, unfortunately, especially in the court system and lawyers and opposing counsels and CPS, they're supposed to help you. And it's really, sadly, a very non-supportive environment for
Very,
families dealing with trauma.
very, very disappointing to say the least. And you and I are going to
Yeah.
unpack those chapters right there of your story. But before we get to those, I want people to get to know Meg a little bit. And I want to ask you, when you were married to this individual, the father of your child, I know what you did for a living. You took care of children.
Yes.
And there was things that happened in the home that caused your daycare, your licensed daycare, to close down and for you to lose income. I also know that you, the woman with a young child, how old was he when this started happening? Wasn't he like 3, 4 or something around there?
Yeah. Well, there had been issues before that, but when it finally really started to become unbearable, he was about 3, and that lasted from about 3 to 4, and then right before my child started school is when the big explosion happened and the shutdown of my daycare, because I could not in good faith operate any further with the things that occurred
And other
while
people's children in
in front
your
of
home.
other people's children in my home. That was one of the major disillusion moments, that it was very clear that this could no longer carry on.
For sure. And these were children that you had established a bond with. And
Yeah.
so the well-being of the child who had been in your care while mom and dad are obviously working, there was some sort of, separation, and I watched you grieve these children that were in your home full time. And just for our listeners and our viewers, as we're, throwing narcissism around as a culture still today ad nauseum,
Right.
frankly, we what we're talking about here is a spectrum. Anybody that just gets up, kind of gets dressed and cares about their appearance might have this teeny bit of what we call this self-focused nature, but then the continuum starts to grow, and in the middle somewhere it's this self-serving, grandiose entitlement, and in the end, which would be, as somebody who worked formerly in a clinical position, it would be a full-blown personality disorder, which is really the complete inability to access empathy. And so we're just talking about the mid-range here of somebody who is just selfish and not even concerned about the impact on other people. And what this means in a relationship, the first thing that it means is coercive control. That everything revolves around this individual, which means the wife and the child in this case, although it does happen with women too, for the men who may pick this episode up. It does happen for men too, but everybody walks on eggshells to prevent reactions from this person. And as we have this compliance behavior, it makes them worse. When
Yeah,
we have preferences, when we have a voice, when we have boundaries, it also makes it worse if we're living there still. But
absolutely.
when we have the courage to remove ourselves from the situation,
Hmm.
then we have a little bit of a buffer to take care of self better. However, what I would like you to talk about next is how difficult it is after the court proceedings to send your child to this person that you know isn't safe.
Yeah.
For instance, I'm just going to say it. Uh,
Same.
Somebody that's drinking and driving with the child in the car,
Absolutely.
and you had evidence of it, you were aware of it while you were there, you had mentioned this. There were professionals that filed some reports with agencies when the child talked about this and nothing was done. Tell me how it was for you to be away from this person and have a little bit more buffer to take care of yourself, but then your child is in this situation, you have no control over what he's experiencing, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. To sum it up in one word, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. Um, it's probably the worst torture as a mother to have to send your child basically to the wolves where they will experience the same abuses you did. Because essentially, all that happened was we switched places. And so, unfortunately, um, when I do bring up these very legitimate and valid concerns to professionals who are in charge of taking care of the child's best interest, um, I am labeled overprotective. Um, uh, a
Nope.
mother bear.
No
Uh,
kidding. You're accused of overreaction.
it's something that is, it's kind of almost laughable because at that point I kind of ask the question, well, isn't that my job?
Pretty much, honey.
But also, isn't that the other parent's job as well?
Sure.
And we have this stalemate of, as verbatim was stated by a court official, well, it's in the order. And that was quite shocking to me, that that statement was as if the realities of the world do not continue to be the realities of the world, as if that were as important as the child's safety.
Absolutely. And since you mentioned the order, let's just go there. Let's just go there about the custody order reinforcement for the courts, right? So the court, especially in our state, other places too, but I've done expert witnessing a couple times for different cases here in California, and they're pretty good about making sure they try to get the 50-50, right? And so that's what happened.
Pretty standard. Yeah.
Pretty standard to try to get to that point, with or without mediation. But what has happened is the other party's rights are being enforced, but you have things on your end that protect you and your child, like that you had stated that you're, and I know because I was there,
Right.
for everybody listening,
Right.
that stated you desired counseling for your child, and that there would be some monetary support for that. Now, let me ask you, how did that go? Was that enforced? Was that part of the order enforced by the courts?
No, no. It is, as of right now, it is being taken care of because thank goodness the healthcare portion was able to be taken care of, but it was always a fight. It was never, well, I'm still waiting. It's about
How long have you been waiting? Because we went to court
over
2 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and this is how also certain individuals partake in this custodial situation. Some things are followed and some things are not. It's more of a drive-through menu. And so I'm still waiting on probably, a good quarter of the year, half of the year of reimbursement, multiple times, requested, multiple times sent documents, following the court order to provide the other parent documentation, notification, following through, letting them know in advance regarding X, Y, and Z for the child, for this, for that. And it is conveniently forgotten about, which then leaves myself and my child at a financial hardship that may or may not get resolved unless I go back to court.
Which would incur more legal fees.
And more time and more effort and more opportunities for abuse.
Yes.
The verbal abuse has never stopped.
The verbal abuse by the other parent.
By the other parent has not stopped.
And if I remember correctly, of course I do, there was an entourage that accompanied this person to court, and which was one of the reasons that you and I decided, even though I'm an hour away from you, that we got together and said, okay, you cannot go into this environment alone. And even though you had legal representation, which I was able to witness in one of the breakout rooms in the court, we were sitting at the table and you were stating some of your concerns and advocating for yourself, and your own lawyer accused you of being difficult and literally implied that you should play nice. And I grabbed my phone and text you under the table, and if I remember correctly, the words I text was WTF.
Correct. Yes.
So tell me about how that felt this person, this, first of all, the court, it's supposedly supposed to be there for both parties' rights, but there's a lopsided enforcement of the order
Yes.
on his end, not your end. There's been how many CPS cases now?
In the
3?
last 6 months, there have been 2
By professionals, not you.
by professionals, not me.
And these CPS reports from professionals intervening on your behalf and of course on behalf of your son.
Yes.
What came out of those reports out of a state agency that's there to protect children?
The letter that I received notifying me that there would be no further investigation because it didn't warrant one. Now, this was a incident of domestic violence within the time frame of the other co-parent, and drinking and driving, putting the child in the car once again, which has been an ongoing issue, which is an ongoing concern for me. While on vacation, and it either wasn't communicated that is in the court order, that is not an acceptable thing, that is not. But regardless, the laws state that you are not to drink and drive. Period.
Period.
Period. To then place a child or children or others in the car is even more of a violation of safety, of trust, of more morality, whatever you want to call it. But it's just blatant disregard for any respect for anyone else, which is the reason I have those concerns and have had those concerns
from the very beginning.
Which is one of the reasons why the marriage dissolved in the first place.
Because you were not on the same page about the drinking, number one, and about this lackadaisical attitude about drinking and then having children in the car.
Right.
And it caused tension in the marriage amongst other subjects, I remember. And so this protecting your child led ultimately to you filing for divorce. And now there's been a divorce decree in place for quite some time, adjustments to the child settlement, or I'm sorry, the child custody agreement. And the same problem that existed in the beginning is continuing.
It's habitual, and it has been habitual since 2009. It's been an issue. There have been violations that have occurred, even before my child was born. And so I knew going in that this was going to be a point of contention. I let my counsel know, I let mediators know, I let the judge know, I provided evidence, I provided documentation, and it's in the order, or the order was fulfilled to this person's ability to also, within the constraints of alcoholism and their routine, be able to mask it, be able to keep it hidden, keep it secret, keep it,
undetectable for sure, even though in the beginning there was a breathalyzer.
Correct. Even at that point, there were violations that, my counsel, and it was pushed aside, brushed aside, not taken seriously.
Yes.
At one point, I asked my lawyer, does something bad have to happen before anything, before my child's voice will be heard.
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up, Megan. I'm so glad you brought that up. And so people that are hearing and watching know that I personally know where you're coming from. I'm going to interject a little bit of a piece of my history here. Being a young mom in her early 20s and nearly losing my life after a horrifically violent rape and sodomization, where I went to ER and my and then a women's shelter later. What happened when I went to court is nobody thought about how I might feel sitting 10 feet away from the person that had done this. And in the hearing, of which no consequence ever came to this person, even though today I lived with a fused cervical spine because of it, but there were no consequences ever. But in that hearing, the judge disclosed my location, even though there was a protective order. And the care of victims, this was a long time ago, 1997. And to see stuff like this continuing to happen this many years later, and although this was in another state, and we're talking about your case, which is here, we don't need to mention even where that is, but there's a pattern.
There's pattern of behavior.
And,
Very,
and this is
very
why we
obvious.
call it court-sanctioned abuse. Megan, let me just ask your personal opinion with your experience here. Do you believe that the family court system is aware of the impact of narcissistic abuse and coercive control?
Absolutely not.
Do you believe that in the courtroom, as a woman with a child who you have had to start over,
Yeah.
you were literally destitute
Mhm.
and trying to get backpacks and school supplies and counseling and medical care, like you do it all for this kid, while the other person is essentially, we're just going to say it, and other women will nod, Disney parent, right?
Yeah. Disneyland. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just going to have fun and we're going to go on vacations, and there's no rules and there's no, accountability and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's so fun to come over here to this place, which is why a lot of children will defend the other parent, even though there's an enmeshment and a inappropriate sharing of emotion and a hijacking of the child's emotional experience. And then let's not forget the treating the child like the messenger instead of
Correct.
communicating with the parent directly. So
And
talk to me a
I,
little bit about those things you're
yeah.
experiencing.
And well, as a part of our custody agreement, we are to communicate via a court-appointed app that is supposed to be monitored. Um, because of the verbal abuse, because of the financial abuse, I wanted everything documented so that there was seemingly no place to hide. Whatever I said was on record, whatever they said was on record. I felt at the time that that was the most um, sane, safe, um, accountable situation that I could muster at that point in time, because just messages privately were hellacious.
Could you
They
describe
were
that a little bit?
they, they were full of accusatory statements, um, also hoovering, manipulative, I'll do this if you do that kind of thing. Well, let's just talk ourselves. Let's not have this app be used. We can do this. Um, we don't need to, why can't we just talk amongst ourselves? So always the pulling in to try to isolate, to try to have it be done in the dark, silently, quietly. And I said no. I said no. And that's for not only my safety, but it's also for his safety. It's so that no one can go off. It's the, in my opinion, it should have been the most unbiased form of communication. Plain and simple. Keep it on record, keep it clean, keep it neat. Then there won't be any more abusive statements being made.
But
There
did
won't.
that happen in this app, or did it just continue to come even though this app is monitored?
Yeah, it still occurred. It still occurs. The accusatory statements, the the name calling, the, oh, you're making such a big deal about this. It how do I say this? The same person showed up, regardless of who's watching.
Regardless of who's watching. So these things that are put into place to supposedly keep an environment conducive to healthier co-parenting are flawed.
Yes.
Or
Because the monetarization was not, it's not followed through on. It's not considered emotional abuse because, well, people argue. That was the statement that I received from mediators, lawyers. It was just something to be expected, something to be absorbed. Just absorb that. Just take it.
all of this has got to leave a feeling of just powerlessness about being able to, control what your child is experiencing over there, about what you're experiencing. So I'd like you to describe first some of the things you've had to do in your own process and work to cope and to stay sane. And then if you would dovetail that into the journey you've watched your child go through after exposure to this other individual that you know is not healthy, and what he's experienced and how you've been able to deal with that. I'll guide you as you go along because I know that's a lot.
Yeah, thank you. So it came down to, I had to decide for myself that this person was not going to change. This person was not all of a sudden going to show up to be a co-parent when they couldn't show up for the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It got to the point where I had to, through my own work, start to practice some radical acceptance of things that are out of my control. I do not have control over what happens at the other house. I do not have control over what this person does and says. I only have influence and the ability to model healthy, respectable communication, engagement, acknowledgement of feelings, my own, my child's. I had to kind of come to terms with the fact that this is what it is. These are the cards that I was dealt, and I have to make the most of it because I have little ears and little eyes watching, and I will not allow that child to be without skills and tools to perpetuate this cycle, because it is a cycle and he will be exposed to that, not only in this relationship, but in other relationships in the world. And so I felt that it was my duty and as his mother. However difficult it is, to give him as much of the tools that I didn't have early on. So I had to identify those things within myself first through counseling, through meditation, through admittedly breaking, you know, things that didn't work, things that no longer served me. I really distanced myself from this individual with trying to work it out. I did a lot of research on counter parenting or parallel parenting, because essentially I really had to look at it as a business. This is my business and this is what my business will be because these are my morals and this is my side of the street over here, and that's really all I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And that fact alone really showed up for me, in alignment. I had things work out for our benefit, my son's and my benefit, because I did not engage in the drama, the back and forth, the those things still I still had feelings about all of those things, about those, cycles that still occurred, but I had to really self-reflect. Also, dark humor works very, very well.
Yes,
That
it
is
does.
that is something that helps lessen the feeling of despair for me, because I still feel it, but I had to put it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that helped. I also reached out to my, spiritual community, and that really helped as well. Finding women going through this all over,
Yeah.
all over,
Yes.
all over. And so that was something that really helped me. And then seeking out counseling for my child who desperately, desperately needed it. There were examples of residual influence from those very tricky, hard to manage, hard to understand situations that would come up with normal co-parenting, and also with the co-parenting situation that our child was placed in. Lots of push pull of he said, she said, lots of stories being shared by the other party that were untrue, lots of manipulation to try to get on side, opportunities to have custody that then the child was, coming home. Mom, they talk bad about you all the time. They say these things about you, and, they say that didn't happen, that didn't occur, that you're crazy, all of those things. And essentially, I got to the point where it was kind of like, well, what do you think? Let's look at that situation. Let's look at the behavior. Because I have worked with children and child development and have educated children for multiple years, I understand those questions are going to come up. The child has questions. They want to know why. They want to understand it as far as they can, appropriately, developmentally appropriately, which was always my stance, is that, what he can handle at this point in time without also tainting his own views, his autonomy. That was a very big thing that we discussed and that we practiced, is his own autonomy. Um, what did he think? How did it feel when those things were happening? What was going on? Because I took a lot of the things that I learned, and because he did not have counseling at that time, used same methodologies in my own healing to try to give him some skills to be able to transition back and forth, because transitions were difficult leading up, incredibly difficult to re-regulate on the return of custody. Um, very visceral reactions, very physical manifestations of stress, of inconsistency, of, coming to me like, why is this happening, Mom? And me just saying, hey, I don't know, but we can talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I will support you. You may never get the answer to that, but how are you going to manage that? Not control, not influence, but how are you going to manage that? Because ultimately, I, through my own healing, have realized you can't control anything except yourself.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Wow, you did such a great job with that big loaded question. Like that's a lot in one question. You did a fantastic job.
Thank
You
you.
know, I just as an aside, I can witness you, staying present in your body, even though I know you're experiencing emotions, and this is one of the benefits, of the work that you have done and you are doing for yourself. But to your point about some of the things your child experienced, like this is a predatory, individual to initiate a loyalty bind, to put the child in a position of do you like me more and don't like the other party more. Here are all the reasons why you need to side with me, that type of thing. Also the dismissing of the child's own intuition, which instills self-doubt. No, that's not what happened. You're whatever, making things up, etc. And also there's the influence of what people call flying monkeys. And for those who don't know, I really think this term was adopted from the famous movie The Wizard of Oz, right? Um,
Yeah.
and and the monkeys flying and doing the witch's bidding. Okay, so whoever put that in the science books, like I really don't know, but it's a really good relatable thing, and I know that you've experienced that with your child after the divorce and in the transition, and things like that are in the order, like you get first right of refusal if the other parent is not available for some reason and the child needs care. The child goes to you first, and
Right.
then you decide whether or not that you're able to without taking off work, or the obvious. And there have been some things that I know presently, currently, that
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with the same entourage showing up to things like sporting practice and events and etc. And so tell me a little bit more about your experience with, because every woman listening to this is going to relate. Tell
Yeah.
me about flying monkeys, Megan.
Um, so there was always the element of the very toxic family dynamic um, within the family unit, the family of origin. Um, and so when then there was trouble, when there was an issue that occurred, they would come in, and it would be this campaign of, we're going to support and we're going to show up and we're going to do these things. because that person is crazy. That thing didn't happen the way they said it did. It was always the we are right, you are wrong kind of dynamic. Um, the victimization of self, of, oh, how could you do this to me? All of those things. So accountability was completely avoided, um, denied to the point of absurdity. It was just one of those things where it was just like, how can you, doesn't even make logical sense. Um, and there was always without putting my own, you know, interpretation of it, but from the outside looking in, there was always the intention to intimidate, always the intention to, well, we know better, and how could, divide and conquer kind of mentality. Um, Never take accountability. It was always someone else's fault. Um, how could I, I'm just the so sad, I'm just trying to do all of these things and you're trying to hurt me kind of communication, act, portrayal. And case in point, at one point in time during a custodial exchange, um, the time frame that the custodian, of the child was at that point before the exchange, I arrived early, um, after requesting not to meet in a certain area where there was alcohol being served, where the child was exposed to other adults that was not appropriate, in my opinion. And, the co parent was not there, but the child was being cared for by other caregivers. And at that point, the child was forced to stay seated, because it wasn't time for the exchange. Um,
So
and child,
what you're saying is, even though you arrived a couple minutes early and your child was in this environment and you initiated the transition, you were denied by these people who were not the parent. You were denied access to your child, and your child, who stood up, was told to sit down. Your child was denied access to you, his parent.
yes. And then the next action was to call the other parent, to distract the child, to stay with the caregivers for that time period. Um, I went over and assured my child, hey, I am here early, um, to try to diminish and to try to deflect a little bit of the um, high emotions at that point in
Mhm.
time. The child was visibly scared, was visibly distraught, kind of shocked. Um, and so I retreated to allow the time frame to lapse to the according time frame.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, the co-parent was not there at all, and had not been for many, many hours. Um, and that was then a very, very, very scary situation for my child. Very scary situation for my child. Um, I, waited the allotted time and then approached and said, okay, where are your things? Let's go get your stuff, and the exchange was very, aggravated, was very, well, very violent. I'll just say it. It was very violent, very accusatory, very, just perpetually, um, sought to intimidate, sought to make that situation very volatile. And, then finally was went back to the place where I had originally intended to pick up the child, where there was no issues, no, others watching. It was not in public. It was, you know, very calm. And the exchange then happened with the other individual that was caregiving at the time. And that was that. But in the meantime, the child had experienced this intense, almost hostage like
Mhm.
situation,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
because they were, I don't know, inflicting a time frame that didn't necessarily need to occur.
Right.
It, it just increased conflict for that time period, which then had direct effect against the child.
Yes.
Um, I brought that to the co-parent's attention, and it was once again then dismissed and, you know, denied. And, I must have misunderstood what was happening. Um,
A little bit of gaslighting there.
Deflective, gaslighting, blame shifting,
Mhm.
stonewalling,
Mhm.
um, all of the things, because how could those individuals be capable of that? But it has then greatly affected the relationship for the child. Um, the child is now terrified of being around and being placed in this caregiving environment. Something that they work currently on in counseling. But as far as, I'm trying to then create, neutral third party caregiving situations. I'm trying to, as the child has grown, as the child has, expressed and practiced more autonomy, they have made it very clear that they do not want to be in the presence of alone these individuals, that, even in the flawed co-parenting situation, they feel more safe in that situation and want to uphold that relationship more so than essentially the people who held them hostage,
Mhm.
which I understand
Absolutely.
completely.
And it inappropriate. Like, I'm here for my kid. You're not the parent. Give me my child. And this goes back to our point earlier about first right of refusal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody can keep you from your child. They're not the other parent. They should have relinquished the child. And at this age, children will absorb blame. So when he was corrected for going to his mother and instructed to sit down, he had done something wrong,
Yeah.
and felt very much in the middle, from what I gather you're saying, in the middle of whoever these people are to him, and then his own mom, and then where is my other parent, who has not been here for hours, who is supposedly supposed to be spending time with me. And along those lines, isn't there something in the court order about, the frequency of visiting or sharing time, and have you found, um, and last question about this subject before we switch gears, have you found that the other party is demanding time, but then when it comes to the time that they asked for, they don't show up, no communication, no, and
Yeah.
the child is left disappointed and confused,
Mhm.
and and absorbing the blame of why didn't my other parent come to see me? Is something wrong? And then worrying about the other parent. Maybe they died, maybe they got in a car accident, or why aren't they here? And then there's no explanation to be given to the child, because of course it's not your explanation to give, but also the other parent isn't circling back around and acknowledging harm done to the child. Tell me about that stuff going on for the past several years.
Um, so essentially there, in the order there is, phone calls in place, visitation in place, all of those things that is, to occur. The child should not go so many, days without seeing the other parent. Those stipulations were placed in the order. And it's like to the hour stated in the order itself, but the loophole being that, well, if this person is working, you have to be accommodating. Well, if this person is, you have to accept that that's what they decide on their time. You know, there's all of this. Well, this may be the statement, but then there's so much gray area to be interpreted. And because we already cannot come to an agreement, which is why we have a custodial agreement, it just leaves so much opportunity for further conflict, um, unnecessary further conflict. When I had pushed to be more black and white, this is, the situation that if this occurs, then this will occur. If this occurs, then this will occur. Those kinds of things. But because the time frame doesn't specifically state, well, while the child is in the care for 48 hours, but it doesn't specifically indicate that, like, well, but does that mean awake time? Does that mean that you're actually there with the child supporting them and not asleep? Or, you then, because it's within that 48 hours and I have to work, essentially the child is then moving in with, other caregivers during that custodial time.
When you might be available.
When I am available,
When
when
you
I
are
have made
available.
myself available, when I have adjusted my work schedule and my life to be there for my child to work, to function on a daily basis as a parent with my child. And the other co-parent does not. But then engages in abusive language and abusive communication as to then when they do take their custodial time, well, I'm not going to make a big deal about it like you would, end quote. It's a very different dynamic and a very different reality between our homes, which is very jarring for our child. When I have just tried to be consistent and appropriate and do things that then support my child's education, their socialization, their mood, enjoyment, within the parameters of being a responsible parent. Not everything is fun. Sometimes you have to do work and you have to do chores and you have to do routines. Those are normal, typical life skills that you need to
And you hear the word no.
Yeah.
No.
Yes. That is, hey, we're not going to do that because of these reasons.
Yes.
Hey, that's not appropriate because of this. Things like that. But yeah, even so, then there is a specific point where, we have access to phone calls with our child during the other custodial parent's time. I have never made that an issue. The child is free to call at any point in time. And so is the parent. I at one point it got to be during mediation, the phone call situation was altered because the other parent made some complaints about duration time. She's bothering me during my time. She always sees him and then she's always calling when he's with me, which was inaccurate to start. I'm with my child most of the time, every single day. I have, daily communication with my child on a regular basis. But the other parent will go a week, 10 days without responding or calling
When the
or
child has reached out,
when
the
the child has
parent
reached
will,
out,
the parent doesn't respond.
the child does not receive a
I'm
return
I'm
phone
sorry.
call,
Okay.
does not
Yes.
receive a return phone call or a return any follow-up message, text message, anything. The child doesn't have a phone currently because they're too young.
Of course.
Um, and but so, phone calls are available and able for them to call their parent at any point in time from any phone from any individual that this child is with. Stipulations that are used against me during, when the child is with other caregivers are you can only call between this time and this time. And I'm like, that's not what's stated in the order. No.
Mhm. But there's
Um,
still no ability for you to enforce the order on the people who are caring for the child that are not the co-parent, and you don't have the co-parent support that says, "Oh, like no, I can talk to my child whenever I want." These people are deliberately uncooperative, as a way to put it
and
bluntly, spite you.
absolutely. Uh, Phone calls are interfered with on, when I am the callee. Um, they're not private, which is stated in the order. So many things that occur that I have to let go because my child's mental health is a lot more important to me
Yes.
than making that phone call. I just stay consistent because my child requests that. Hey, mom, do you want, hey, hey, son, do you want me to call you? Yes, mom, I want you to call me. Okay, then I will do that. But the child then experiences on the other side no communication, a communication, you know, desert, if you would, where days and days will go with no communication from a sibling, from a parent, and the child will then start to think that something bad had happened. Something, because I know my dad drinks. I haven't heard from them in 10 days. I hope they're okay. Things like that, that the child thinks about and
It's a
deals with and
heavy,
carries
heavy
is
burden.
just inappropriate.
Hmm.
It's not necessary.
Hmm.
Um, you know, it's a 30-second phone call.
Hmm.
It's a, sometimes it's, and then unfortunately, a lot of the time, the response is, well, I'm at work. Well, I'm, doing this or doing that. And you got to just understand. And, well, yeah, I can't answer the phone all the time. And, the child just is left then defeated and deflated and then starts to question their own feelings,
Yeah.
their own emotions. Like,
Hmm.
well, am I crazy? Should I feel this way? Lots of, because they are such a sweet, compassionate child,
Yes.
they care about this person. They truly care about this person. And it's really sad um, that other person doesn't see it, doesn't respect it, um, doesn't support it.
Mhm.
But we can only control and we can only manage
Yeah.
our choices, our decisions, our feelings, which is one of the things that we focus on um, daily. Hey, what am I doing? Is this about me or is this about someone else? Because I can only handle me. I can
What a,
only do what I can do.
what a great practice. Does this even belong to me? To be able to give that to a child, and just really quickly to give listeners and watchers an understanding of how safe you are for children, not just your own. You are currently working in a capacity, and you have been for a very long time, that involves background check and fingerprinting. So even the state of California has nodded their head to you as a safe individual to take care of children, and of course that means your own as well. And the inconsistency of the other party, when we're the it's supposed to be 50-50, but it's not 50-50, because you're the one who makes all the decisions, takes him to all the appointments, makes sure he has follow up, everything that he needs, gets to practices, has equipment, you have snacks in your purse, like all this stuff. I know about you. You're participatory in the sporting stuff that he's doing, and so is your lovely mother, and sometimes your sister. But as far as the other parent, this child sometimes sits at school or wherever wondering if the other parent is going to show up like they said they were. And there have been times that the child, as he got a little bit older, that he had instructions like, okay, well, if they don't show up, call me. I'll come get you, or your grandmother or somebody. There has to be a backup plan just in case.
Yeah.
The parent that was awarded 50-50 custody doesn't show on the date and time, number one, they're supposed to, and number two, they promised. Is that correct?
Correct.
And as I've known you, and I've heard your stories along the way here the last 5 years, I've heard of your son younger. Now he's getting older and big, but when he was younger, he had stomach ache, fatigue. It's almost like he would come home, and as you took him to get these things checked out, there was no foundation for, no illness per se, but you believed it was directly correlated to the emotional stress he was under in this environment that involved some walking on eggshells, some avoiding, a parent's reaction, or off his routine completely, sometimes going without bathing, food at appropriate hours, or appropriate nutrition. I know all of these things you as mother are mindful of. And he came home and just collapsed, and sometimes slept for inordinate amounts of time. And then older, it's turned into some behavioral stuff, some obstinance, some defiance, some anger displays, a lot of it coming out at you, which is very hard to deal with. I remember going through that too with my sons. And it's so difficult because, like, I'm here for you. Like, I'm the one who's consistent, and I'm the one who's, and we feel like it kind of backfires on us. And this is really an opportunity for us to test our skills in being able to regulate, which doesn't mean not feel right now. Regulate means being able to feel and stay present without resorting to old coping strategies, like retaliating against the child or defending or something like that. But these are really hard moments to deal with, when we can't tell the child, well, your other parent's doing a shit job. Like, you need to be mad at them. We would never, but in our heart of hearts, like, we're carrying that burden.
It's a
child, because we're taking on willingly that load of stress.
Right.
We're happily taking a bullet for our child. Like, put it on me. I'm safe. Act out, because every child that is safe will do this stuff. So I will carry that, and you can grow, and we're going to get through it together. Go ahead, take the floor.
And even the child stating that to me, Mom, the reason why I, comes in after the blow up, Mom, I'm sorry, I just don't have anywhere to put it. You're the safest place. I don't, I can't do this there. I can't say this there. If I say that, I'll get put in timeout. you know,
Mhm.
um, and I'm, yeah, okay. I hear you, son. I hear what you're saying. You are allowed to have these feelings. There's no feeling too big or too small. I can handle all of it. Been there, done that. One realization I think that my child at one point um, came to me with was, um, "Mom, did you feel this too?"
Mm.
And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he goes, "How do you make it go away?" And I was like, "Well, honey, you don't." I'm a firm believer in telling the truth appropriately
Okay.
where they can digest it, um, without having it to be too heavy. Um, but I said, yeah, you sometimes you don't get an apology. Sometimes you're not gonna get, you know, hey, I'm sorry that I did that, or hey, that that was not cool of me. So we practice that a lot. If I mess up and I do something, even if it's a menial thing, I apologize to my child. I tell my child I'm sorry. I express to them what I'm feeling in real time and ask for space, or I ask for appropriate affection. Hey, I'm having a really hard time. Can we just take a break? Can we do a check-in? We practice a lot of those things. We meditate together. I get requests for, hey mom, can you put on singing bowls? Um, and we breathe, and we have our own, little set of mantras. But for the time before he had access to counseling, those were the only things that got us through, because the child was dysregulated leading up to, dysregulated coming back from. Inevitably there would be a Monday morning after an exchange that there would be an issue at school, and I would get a phone call. um, the after school program that my child attended, there would be a social issue that occurred that I'd have a discussion with the director about. Um, it got to the point where it was just like, oh, was this a other parent weekend?
Ah.
And it
Ah.
would be things, you know, not super violent, not super, disruptive, but disruptive enough to cause attention where it didn't need to be. Negative attention and placed upon the responsibility of the child, which was not their stuff.
And is abuse.
Correct.
That in and of itself is abuse. A lot of the things that you mentioned here is child abuse. And unfortunately, in the courts, unless, like you said, do we have to wait for somebody to get hurt? And we're running out of time here, but I just want to make this point. This is why I have women coming to me today in my private coaching practice that refuse to file for child support, because then they have to go into the court system and they don't have control over the safety of their child.
Yeah.
So they would rather work 2 and 3 jobs, and have full control. Some of these women, not married, not needing a divorce decree or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they would rather stay away from the court system because they hear stories like this where they are not advocated for. And even more importantly, neither is the child.
Neither is
So,
the
Megan, really quickly, we have about 2 minutes. What would you say to a woman who is just embarking on this journey that you have been going through for quite some time? What would you say to her to encourage her and help her look forward to the light at the end of this long and sometime arduously dark tunnel.
You gave birth. You can do anything.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Megan. If you want to hear from more from Megan, please leave it in the comments because I talk to her all the time. So chances are we'll bring her back and maybe I'll post that pre-interview of us, Megan, just kind of set it up and then people can see your name again and it'll be a more lighthearted. But this was a really good conversation of a topic that we need to discuss. I can count 25 women right now that I know either professionally or just personally, socially, that are going through something similar, and it needs to be talked about. Like somebody needs to go to the court and go, hey, like what? Why is it okay with you that the wife and the child are experiencing these things, and there's no repercussions for the other party, none
Right.
at all. Thank you so much, Meg. I love you
Yeah,
dearly.
I love you too. Thank you
Well,
so much for this opportunity.
oh, you're welcome. We'll see you next time.
Okay.